everybody. My name is Matt Kremens. I'm the co-founder of CivilTalk. Welcome today to another episode of our CivilTalk podcast. I am here today with Sondra Cosgrove, Executive Director of Vote Nevada. Sondra, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, good morning, Matthew. And I love you because you can say my name correctly and Nevada correctly.
That's right. That's right, Nevada. All right. I love it. So let's jump right into it. Thanks so much for joining today. You guys are a new organization on CivilTalk. We're super excited to have you on. For the viewers today, tell us a little bit about Vote Nevada. How did it get started and what is it about?
Sure. So I'm a history professor at a community college here in Las Vegas. And so ever since I've started working with students at the community college, I would consistently get questions from my students, like during office hours and even sometimes in class, where they would say, okay, well, how did they add that amendment to the Constitution? And how do you run for office? And so I started realizing for a broad swath of our American electorate, people just don't know how to do basic civic processes. And it's gotten worse as we started replacing civics education with job training. And I have nothing against job training. People need a paycheck, but you're subtracting out civics education. So unless you're somebody going to a private school or you have parents who understand civic processes, people didn't know how to do things. So I said, you know what, I need to be doing this out in the public as well, because I'm sure there's lots of people who need to get a business license or do something, run a ballot question, just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So that's where Vote Nevada came from. Our tagline is solving problems with civics.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, when did you guys first form the organization and how long has it been active?
So about 18 months. And I was with the League of Women Voters before that. And League does a lot of civics education and voting rights and stuff. But going into the 2020 election cycle, so many things had changed because of the pandemic. People were confused. There were screaming, lawsuits, all this stuff was happening. And League was very focused on voting rights, which is super important. But I was getting all kinds of questions from folks in Nevada about how do I track my online ballot? What does the word cure mean? Right. Am I able to do this? I don't understand that. Yeah. And so a bunch of us with League said, we need a Nevada-focused nonprofit that can do more than voting rights. It needs to be the whole gamut of civics education. Mm-hmm. So we all said, okay, we're going to move over and do a new nonprofit.
Yeah, that's great. In your opinion, and I absolutely agree with you with when you were saying people don't really have a basis of civic education at all. It's kind of gone away in our society. Why do you think that is? Like, how did we get to where we are where, a lot of people say, well, I don't know how to vote, or I don't know how to submit these files, or, apply for this, or.
Right. A couple of things I think have happened is that our economy is changing. And so we are going through same time, kind of a tumultuous time where people are changing jobs and need more skills. And so education has just become job training. And I have nothing against job training, but education is supposed to make you into a good civic citizen as well. But what the political parties have done, and I hold both of them accountable, is they're like, well, it's fine because we as the political parties will just do things for you. And I am completely opposed to that. Every person who lives in this country needs the ability to say, I can do it for myself, especially if you have to hold the political parties accountable. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an accountability agenda here that if you, Matthew, don't know really how to hold the parties accountable, you have to depend on them to do things for you. And so you're not going to hold them accountable. And so I want you, Matthew, to be able to roll up into their grill and say, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think a lot of people in our country are sort of frustrated with the behaviors of the two political parties, especially on certain topics and issues and the last couple electorate cycles. But to your point, they really don't know what they can do about it, right? So a lot of people have kind of become apathetic.
And they're super frustrated,
apathetic, and they don't really have the knowledge base and the tools to understand, like, what do I do?
They don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Right. And so I get a lot of those questions is, I don't even know where to start to do this. I don't know who to talk to, where to go. So I just spend a lot of time going, oh, you want to understand about how to run a ballot question. Secretary of State does that in Nevada. Let me show you where you start and where you then read the rules and things. And then oftentimes I say, if you get stuck again, circle back around and I'll help you. But once I get people started, then they're like, oh, I get it now, and off they go.
Off they go. Yeah, that's interesting. How have you guys grown the organization over the past couple of years? And I guess the two-part question to that is, how do you scale that knowledge? You know, because obviously thousands of people, you can't take thousands of phone calls every day.
Exactly. So, I mean, people already knew me as being kind of the civics geek with League of Women Voters. So when I changed hats, people still knew me as the civics geek. But what I try to do is, if I'm hearing a lot of the same questions, is I say to like the Secretary of State, to the Assistant Deputy for Elections, hey, Mark Balashin, I'm getting a lot of questions about mail-in ballots. Can we do a Zoom meeting with you and record this?
Yeah.
And I always get a yes, because he's probably getting a lot of questions too, and it's taking up his time. Let's do one recorded Zoom meeting, and then I'll just put it on my blog. And then when Matt asks the question, I'm like, here, Matt, here's a recording right there. Share it around with your friends if you're hearing the same question.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you're right. In the current age we live in, it's all about creating that content, right? That can be shared and duplicated and used over and over again to educate people. Do you guys do any work with like educating youth in school systems as well around civics, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I oftentimes work with teachers.
Okay.
And so it's almost a train the trainer type concept, that if you're my friend and you're an 8th grade teacher and your students are looking at, again, like ballot questions or how to run for office, I might do a training with you and do a specialized Zoom recording for you. And then you become the person that goes out and does the education. And so I do work with a lot of teachers. They're like, how do I package this into a short, I got 50 minutes. Right. So let me work with you on pedagogy and things like that, because also I'm also an educator. And then you become the person that then goes out and does the education for 8th graders.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think that's a big portion of this too, is like, in the elementary schools, the middle schools, et cetera, like like you said, there's such a focus on job training and STEM and that's all great, but students aren't getting the education they need around civics.
Right. And you, let's say you're going to be an entrepreneur in STEM, and I want more of my students to be entrepreneurs. But let's say you run into a licensing problem or a law that's hampering you being able to be an entrepreneur. Then what? Then what are you going to do?
Right. In terms of your relationship with the League of Women's Voters and your success with Vote Nevada, have you guys talked about sort of duplicating that in other states, or are there other programs already in place?
Good segue into CivilTalk.
Yes.
Because CivilTalk has nonprofits that are going to be from around the country. And not only do I want individuals who have the types of questions we're talking about, but I'm also finding it's really useful to be in spaces where I can network with other nonprofits who are doing things that maybe they don't have that civics component, that they've got really great ideas and they're working with people with really great ideas, but they don't know in the state of Illinois what the ballot question process is.
Right.
Maybe I can then connect the Illinois people with the league or somebody that's also working in Illinois, or maybe people with league that want to do a Vote Illinois, right, and do civic stuff. And so that's what I really see. CivilTalk for me is not only individuals logging in, asking questions, but to do collaborative networking.
Yeah, I think that's great, because having that resource for every, like you said, the rules in Illinois, laws in Illinois are different than Nevada, right? The processes are slightly different. So the content is similar, but it is a little bit tailored to the location. So having those connections through a platform like CivilTalk, and then having the org in each location really provides that like comprehensive resource for people.
And that's a confusing thing for Americans, because they assume that every state has the same rules and processes. And I'm like, no, we don't. Everything is very different. And so people will people move here from California a lot or other states. And then I get these questions of like, wait, what's a closed primary? What are you guys doing? This isn't how I'm used to doing this.
Right.
And so, if I was getting a lot of questions from Illinois and I don't see an Illinois specific org, I could then reach out to another community college professor and say, hey, I'm getting a lot of questions from your state. Are you interested in maybe doing some public education around civics? Because I can help you get up to speed and start to run.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. The last question I had for you was, there is a big problem, and you guys are doing a great job at solving it around awareness and education around how to do these things. And then there's also the people, especially a lot of, I would say, young people my age, that we kind of just have a cynical view somewhat on like, well, I could do all these things, but does it really make a difference in that way? There is that apathy question. So, I have my own response to that, but I was curious what your response is. What do you say to those people who are kind of like, well, it doesn't really make a difference anyway, like why bother?
Right. And that's probably the other half of people. Sometimes it's folks that are just trying to figure out how to do like one thing because they're stuck.
Right.
But then I get and I don't even use the word apathetic anymore. I use the word frustrated. They're frustrated and they become apathetic. But what I find is if I can show you a strategy for how to get something done, would you then become unapathetic? Would you become less frustrated? The opposite of that. And so sometimes I have to walk people through a strategy. So how to run ballot questions or how to do advocacy effectively. In the state of Nevada, we have a part-time legislature that only meets every other year for 120 days. So it is mass chaos and confusion during the 120 days, and people get super frustrated. And they'll say to me, it's like, they'll say to me, everything seems to already be done once I get to the legislative session first day. What the heck? I'm like, oh, that's because we have an interim session that the parties don't want you to know about. Let me show you how to do advocacy during the interim, because that's when they actually write the bill draft requests. And they'll say, why don't I know this? I'm like, why don't you know that? It's because the players know about that. So let me teach you how to be a player so that you can show up in those spaces where we're having the initial discussions and the initial brainstorming. Because if you can get your issue heard then, your ability to be successful a year from now is going to go through the roof.
Yeah, brilliant. It's like, I love the word becoming a player, right? It's like you have to build a playbook for them to be able to execute on what they want to get done.
Because I'll say, do you feel like it's like the corporations and certain people have these secret handshakes and all this stuff? They're like, yeah. I'm like, let me show you where the actual playbook for that is, because it's available. You just need to know where it is, and I will show you. Yeah. Which means the political parties hate me because they're like, stop telling our secrets to people. I'm like, oh, too bad. Right, but that's the right thing to do, right? It's open for everyone to be involved in our democratic process, or it should be, right? Exactly. And I'm in a position to do that because I'm a tenured professor. And so it's really hard to tell me to hush. Yeah. Well, that's great. And I love the work you're doing because it's so needed. And I think that is the challenge, right? People become frustrated because they just don't understand the channels of like, how do I actually make something happen? How do I make positive change? Yep. And they think, well, I don't have $1 million, because we all talk about campaign finance reform and, writing the big checks. And I'm like, that is a way, but there's also a way, just understanding how the process works for you to be very effective. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for all the work you do. Sondra Cosgrove, again, Executive Director of Vote Nevada, and awesome. Love your organization, and thank you for being a part of CivilTalk, and really excited. Very excited. For your success. Yes, I'm very excited because I'm gonna network the heck out of CivilTalk. Awesome. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Matt Kremens signing off for CivilTalk podcast.